All right, everybody, welcome to episode 7 of Destination Unknown. I find myself in Covina, California with Jen and Brad at Johnson's Rare Books and Archives. I have been traveling from coast to coast, from Florida to Pennsylvania, and now I'm in California for a stop from Portland, Oregon. And I'm excited to talk to these wonderful booksellers who do more than just sell books. They host book fairs, and I know we want to get deep into talking about that. So what I will do is just have you both introduce yourself to our YouTube audience and tell us a little bit about your operation. And you've been going since the early 80s?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm Jen Johnson and Brad Johnson. We're husband and wife, and we're the owners of Johnson Rare Books and Archives. We have an open shop that's bricks and mortar, which not a lot of people have these days.
Oh,
We're
yeah.
open like basically 3 days a week.
Okay.
That was something like that we switched after COVID. We realized that we didn't have to be open all the time. It took us a while to figure that out. And then we sell online, we sell at book fairs, we sell to institutions. We have a very heavy emphasis in archives, and but we also sell books and realia and all kinds of things. Brad got us started in this business, so I'm going to turn it over to him to talk about our history.
We're going to blame him right off the bat.
Right. Yeah, totally. 100%.
It's gonna be a recurring theme. The shop, as you mentioned, started in 1981, was founded by a gentleman named Charles Jimenez, who owned a number of small general secondhand stores here in Southern California. Around 1985, he sold it to Roger Gozdecki, who was my mentor in the book trade.
Okay.
I started working here in 1993 when I was 15 years old. And before I was old enough to know better.
No, we have a lot in common. You and I were about the same time getting into the book business. Yeah, before the craziness. I know we're going to talk about in a couple minutes.
Sure. Yeah. No. I mean, there was a computer here at the shop at the time, but we used it for maybe our mailing list and compose letters.
Brad, was it like an Apple II?
Oh yeah, the monochrome monitor, the whole
I love that.
the whole dot matrix printer.
Which we had forever.
It took me a long time to.
We are open on Sundays in dot matrix, giant banner, one sheet.
Yes. Oh yes, yeah. We were open back then. We were open 7 days a week, and some days like 10 to 10, and it was like a very bustling community bookstore. I continued working here into my 20s, and then my mentor in the trade, Roger, wanted to downsize, work out of a home office, and sort of specialize in books on California and the West mostly. And so at that point, he was going to just do the fire sale thing. But Jen and I, she blames me, but it was her idea. Said, hey.
Were you guys English majors or just readers? What was the impetus for Brad for you to be working in a bookstore? Was it just a job? You wanted to work in a bookstore?
Yeah, I was a junkie, like from a young age. My raised by parents who, for good behavior would take you to the bookstore, and so when the notice came in my high school bulletin for an apprentice bookseller, I knew the store. I would shop there, and so I rushed down that afternoon to grab an application. So, and here I am.
And you were a voracious reader. What were you reading back then that you could impress Mr. Jimenez with when he said, "Do you read?"
That's Roger was a really thoughtful and slightly peculiar guy. So the application had the standard fill in the blank questionnaire, and then there was an essay portion.
Okay.
And so
I love that.
Yeah, it was. I can't remember all the essay questions, although we still have my application here somewhere
on file.
Yes, just in case.
Yeah, you got to frame that. That's got to go. Got to go on the wall.
Right.
So back then, I mean, one of the questions was, "What's your favorite author?" And I think at that point, Michael Crichton was, I was just tearing through those books.
Yeah.
And what was my favorite book? And at that point, it was To Kill a Mockingbird.
Okay.
I can't.
So Harper Lee on one side, Michael Crichton on the other side.
I mean, I would just grab whatever was around me that stage.
Yeah.
So reading my dad's murder mystery paperbacks, and I went through a kick where I read all Howard Pyle's books, and it's
you were younger than me getting into it, but the first thing that I was so shocked about as a reader and then learning to sell books in an antiquarian bookshop was the price people would pay for a used book. That was my first mind blow. I couldn't believe, we would have customers come in from all over the world to shop in the antiquarian bookstore I got my start in. And it wasn't unfamiliar to drop $500 or $2,000 on a book, which if you're not in that world,
Right.
Jen, what were you reading back then? Do you remember?
Oh gosh. I've always been a voracious reader, but I didn't come to this business from reading.
Right.
Through Brad, obviously, but my background at that point, I had two careers. So I was a newspaper reporter, and then I went into the dark side, as we called it then. I went into public relations. And I think those two things actually set me up perfectly for what I'm doing now, because I'm very curious, nosy, some people might say.
Sure.
But I also learned how to write very quickly and succinctly, and to do promotions. So perfect for sales.
And also great for research.
Yeah.
Start researching the name of the book plate on the book that, the 1852 book you have. Let's research that name. It's always good.
Once I discovered that people actually were willing to pay for other people's mail, basically, as I call it, because I love reading people's letters, diaries. I'm a very, very nosy person. So once I figured out that I could buy those things, research them, tell a story about it, and sell them, I was sold. My heart was singing. So
is that what got you guys into the archival end of the business?
I think we went to some book fairs and we saw that other people were doing that kind of thing.
Yeah, it was
because the shop wasn't really born in that kind of material. It was really very book focused.
Yeah, there was just a general trend towards that material, in the late 90s, as the internet exposed how relatively common certain things were. And
that's a good word, exposed. That's a very good word. The rare wasn't rare anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it was a combination of that, just sort of, seeing the way the market was moving. And also, some material that sort of came into our world that gave us the opportunity to dive right in. We came upon an archive of a German scientist who was brought to the United States as part of Operation Paperclip. And through a customer, we're able to acquire a bunch of correspondence from the poet Langston Hughes, and it was that was our first.
Langston Hughes too. Okay.
So that was our first sort of dive in, a chance to cut our teeth, and never looked back.
And we started doing an ad for, hey kids, read history, get your general education material, because the way in which this Operation Paperclip archive came in to our possession, we had been called out to an estate sale to look at a bunch of old architectural magazines.
And was this in California as well?
Yeah, it was in California. And so we went to the home, and all the stuff was pretty uninteresting. But of course, because, we're booksellers and we're scavengers, we were rooting around in the basement/garage area. And I'm digging through a box that's destined for the dumpster. And Brad's going through a bunch of old books that were in German, and out drops a envelope on the ground. And he picks it up and he's like, Jen, something's going on here, because this envelope is addressed to Hermann Goering. Yeah.
Yeah, that was our first clue. And then it was,
And how early into your partnership in your business did this occur? Was it how early?
So let's see, we bought the shop in 2006. I want to say this was pretty early on, 2007, 2008.
I mean,
And
this kind of find, it puts you in a direction right off the bat. You
yeah,
have to go in.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
so how substantial was the collection?
Oh gosh, it was
Well, we kind of let it sit in our storeroom, honestly, for a couple months because we were so busy with
yeah.
other stuff. And so one night after we had closed, we're like, hey, let's dig through that archive. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it was, I mean, it was, I think it was like half a dozen file boxes worth of material,
Yeah.
but it was really like hard science. We had like, manuscript reports with, tipped in photographs and things of that sort. And a lot of the documentation about how he was brought to California to work in the aeronautics industry. And, of course, since we were like new to the archival game, we did a big write up on it. And the first institution we quoted it to, it took them all of about 2.5 minutes to go, yes. And so clearly we grossly underpriced this thing.
Yeah.
Do you want to share that number or not?
No,
No.
I don't even remember what it was. But at the time, it was a king's
Does
ransom.
Does Jen still yell at you about that now?
Oh, no. I mean, it's all learning. It's all learning.
Right.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
if you were to find that same collection now,
Yeah.
you can literally name your number, especially with the Oppenheimer movie recently coming out. And
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, and I think since then, like science material has, appreciated many times over. There's a lot more academic
Right.
interest in it, as you said, for Oppenheimer and other reasons.
Yeah.
also the ephemera is such a great market. We talked with Kate Midas recently, who deals just in ephemera, and she was explaining how rich and the market is becoming, and actually a younger generation is now picking up the ephemera because they've been raised with no ephemera. They've been raised with cell phones and computers, and for them to see paper goods or vintage posters or magazines with ads in them, it's a learning. That's their history. That's their learning curve.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's also exciting. I mean, from the bookseller perspective too, I think it's great. I mean, there's no disrespect to the people who deal in like high spot literature, but the story's been told about To Kill a Mockingbird and Great Gatsby. There's nothing, you're, as a bookseller, you're not going to be adding much to the conversation, if anything at all. But with many of these pieces of ephemera, you're holding the one that exists,
Right.
and you're going to be able to tell the story of this piece and how it fits in our shared history.
Yeah.
Right.
Even as much as a magazine article and maybe Life magazine or Scribner's advertising, To Kill a Mockingbird as a recent bestseller. Even those ads are of great value now, because like you said, it's completing the story, not just a book now. Now it's telling the story, which is amazing. You guys also I don't know, specialize, but you guys also focus on book fairs.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely want to dig into that with you. Did you recently go to the New York Antiquarian? Were you guys there, or is okay? So
We exhibited at we're members of the Antiquarian Booksellers Association of America, and this was our third year exhibiting at the New York Book Fair, which is the largest book fair in the world. It's pretty fantastic. But we also, for the first year, our company, Rare Books LA, produced the Manhattan Rare Book and Fine Press Fair, which was across the street from the Armory.
Yes, yeah. Kate had mentioned that. Yeah, Kate mentioned that she had gone to that too. Okay.
Yeah, and then Rare Books LA was born in 2018. So there used to be in Southern California a company called Bustamante Enterprises, and they produced book fairs, rare book fairs, and they also produced antique shows. But after 2 generations, they retired. And so for about a year in Southern California, there was nobody producing regional book fairs. And so Brad and I decided, hey, let's give it a whirl. And
As if you weren't busy, as if you weren't busy enough already.
right. Well, busy people get more stuff done.
Of course. Tomorrow, we're going to focus on that tomorrow.
Right. So we produced our first fair. I think our first fair was in 2019, in January 2019, in Pasadena, and kind of following on the Bustamante's model, and because that's where they had their fair. But we had 130 dealers, and we had no idea.
Have enough space for them? That's a lot of tables.
No, we had plenty of space. I mean, with my background in public relations, we used to do a lot of events, so I know a lot about event planning, and there's a lot of just planning that happens, and that's easy. You can't plan for everything though, like the torrential rain that we had, the flooding that we had, the roof leaking, and then the fire alarm going off.
Isn't that great with paper stuff? I mean, that's all the things you want when you're dealing with paper.
Right. But regional fairs are so, so, so important, that we felt like we really had to keep it going, and people agreed. So, because testament to the fact that we had 130 exhibitors at that first fair. And so we do a fair in Southern California. We do them twice a year. Well, sometimes we do them twice a year. So we're in Pasadena when the ABAA is in Northern California with their fair. We are in Southern California with our fair.
Okay.
And then when they're in Pasadena, we are in Northern California. And then in October every year, we have a book fair. We try to have it on the west side of LA. It's actually moved to downtown, and I think we have a permanent location now, and it's Rare Books Union Station. So it's at our Union Station train station.
So is somebody there employees running that specifically?
I'm sorry?
Is that's a brick and mortar as well? Or that's
No. It's just in October.
Okay. I was gonna say, you guys are all.
Oh no! October every year.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And do you plan to expand to other states and really? Brad's laughing. Don't give me.
Well, I mean, it's a test. It's gratifying to hear from so many colleagues. I mean, when we were in New York setting up the big fair, there was like a sort of procession of other colleagues coming up going, you got to do a show in Chicago. You got to do a show in, fill in the blank, and so I think we are open to the concept of expanding. We are, I think our company, Rare Books LA, is unique because it's, booksellers. I've done book fairs since 1994. Jen's done it for 20 years. We've seen it all, the good, the bad, and the otherwise. So we organize very exhibitor-friendly shows, and with Jen's public relations background, and we have a tremendous team led by Jody Tolan, who keeps everything organized. And
who's our sister-in-law, by the way. She's my sister's wife, so
the family. Keep it.
Yeah, it's all a family.
So we've got a string of we've sold out 4 shows in a row, and so it's a lot of work. But yeah, no, I think it's a brand that can be built upon.
And is for you guys specifically, you're organizing it, but are you also showcasing your finds as well?
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And is there something? We're going to get to the heavy metal soon, but is there something that you guys are just so proud of that you exhibit each time you go? Is there a specific type of collection that you're exhibiting?
Yeah, sometimes we do. I mean, our very first show that we did in Pasadena, that was when we actually had the Hugh Hefner collection. So okay. Yeah.
Talk about that. What
we were approached by the Hefner Foundation after he passed, and they were looking for somebody to represent the books.
Just his book collection.
Yeah, just books.
Okay.
And there was some pretty fantastic stuff in there, books inscribed to him by Betty Page and other people that he's closely associated to. There was a copy of On Her Majesty's Secret Service inscribed, which was serialized in Playboy, inscribed by Ian Fleming to Hefner. And
right.
Yeah, so he was a voracious reader, and he, like a true editor, he would sit there with a stack of paper clips and a red editor's pencil and just go to town on these books. So, which isn't always ideal, but his marginalia is very interesting when he's reading a book about Lenny Bruce and he's like
Right.
pressing stuff out and going writing what he actually remembers and things like that. So
I mean, we had his copy of the Kinsey report, which I think was pretty amazing because when he was a college student, he writes in his biography that he was reading the Kinsey report, which really awakened him. Like he came from a pretty conservative family, and that awakened him and really helped him start like Playboy and his other enterprises.
Oh,
And
you
that
know,
lasted for like 5 seconds. We had that for like
yeah,
no
that,
time.
yeah.
Yeah.
how vast was the Hefner collection in volume wise?
So we only gosh there were so that because the Playboy Mansion was a sort of like event space as much as it was a residence. There were a lot of books that were just boxes and boxes of books that were just like he would give away as gifts for people who visited. So we had to kind of separate out things that were genuinely
Noteworthy.
yeah, noteworthy his, and then the rest of the stuff was slid off and not represented as his material.
But because he ran a iconic magazine for so many years, now here's the book collector question in me. Was he also getting ARCs and uncorrected proof copies as well for review?
There were a few, but no,
Yeah,
none.
but nothing notable.
No.
Or
Yeah.
if he was giving them away.
Yeah, that's probably.
But also published there. I mean, Asimov published in Playboy and Bradbury published. You were getting the top of the top sci-fi writers too.
There was a little bit of that in there.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
But he wasn't a really like an antiquarian book collector like that we would think of, or a rare book collector. There, he was collecting knowledge. He was collecting.
Yeah, it was interesting too because the books that were in the Chicago mansion, like they were treated like they were actually library books. They actually had like pockets in them, and
Okay.
ink stamps. Playboy Mansion Chicago, things like that. But of course, the books from that era included things that were like presentation copies from Shel Silverstein, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
pretty interesting things. The later stuff tended to be a little bit more, retrospective. Later, looking back as opposed to influences.
Also finding say letters inside some of these books, or
No.
Rarely. I mean,
No.
just notes, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and has all of that sold now?
95% of it. There are probably a few stragglers. I think we've separated about a bunch of books that we still have, which have to do with sort of what would that be, the second wave or third wave feminism, the 1970s feminism. He was reading those books and marking them up, and so we have a group of them, and we think that it's an interesting counterpoint to women's studies collection. I mean, he's sort of a controversial figure,
Right.
but his perspective is definitely important to the narrative.
Yeah, I recently interviewed Ken Sanders from Salt Lake City, and he was telling a great story when he owned one of his early bookstores in the 70s, and the ERA movement was very strong. Women would come into his bookstore with ERA stickers and put them over any the private parts of say photography books of females or things like that.
Wow.
So I mean, has times changed or what? I mean, it just the world has flipped away. We used to think 30, 40 years ago. It's utterly amazing.
Yeah.
And so you guys also noted that you sell online. And
Yes.
of course I will put your internet page down in our column here. But are you also doing eBay and Amazon platforms, or are you strictly just staying with your website?
We dropped Amazon several years ago. Our inventory is listed on eBay, but it just sort of it mirrors our website, so
Okay.
it's sort of fixed price listings on
Right.
that platform. We do have like an eBay burner account that we that we use to sort of move along material that's a little
Right.
out of our strike zone, or is it worth fixing?
Yeah. And do both of you do all of that? Because I mean, I'm a former high school teacher. I work from home. I sell books out of my home. I have a 3-car garage, so you can imagine that craziness. But I have to have someone who just ships for me, and I have to have someone who does my listing. I'm the primary researcher and the price gauger, but my day would be done if I had to do everything. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, we do mostly do everything. We have divisions of things that we do. Like, Brad has always done all the shipping, although we recently hired somebody to help us. And we've gone through kind of a series of friends, kids, relatives, where it's like their first job.
I'm watching Brad's face as you say each thing. There's a
So,
story zipping through his head as you say each thing.
yeah. We're kind of like in that weird moments where, like, if we know that if we hired somebody who had some real skills that we didn't have to teach
Right.
them, that we could grow, but then we'd be responsible for them. And it's just the struggle of like a micro business. Like, how much responsibility do you want to take on for somebody else's livelihood and well-being? And since I do HR and bookkeeping and taxes, it's really the question of how much do I want to take on, you know? But
You
Brad
feeling
does
the heat,
all the
Brad? Are you feeling the heat?
A little
Yeah.
bit.
Brad catalogs all the books. When we have large collections of books, I will help to like process through them and price them and maybe log them in a different way. And I do like most of the archival work. And he deals with all of the shipping and all of the keeping like the store in line and like that kind of stuff. We both quote things. Yeah.
It's hard work though. Most people
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, it's books on a shelf, but to get them there,
Yeah.
it's a process.
Oh, this is what I want to shake and tell everybody who walks in the store who's like, oh, I'd love to work here. It's
Oh, I'd
like,
love to own a bookstore someday.
yeah, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
You're hired. You're hired.
Yeah.
Come on aboard. You start tomorrow at 7.
Yeah. I have this dream that somebody is going to want to take a vacation because we live also 2 blocks away. So they want to stay in our house. They want to run our shop, watch our dog and our cat, and pay us for their bookseller
Right.
vacation for a week, while we go, or 2 weeks, and we'll go to Europe and have fun and buy books, and they can come live in Covina. Anybody out there who wants to do this, give me a call.
I will put all the information down below for everybody. If you want to
Live out your
funny,
dream.
I was talking to another bookseller this morning from Wisconsin, and we were like, we both have YouTube channels, and we were both like, no one ever makes a video about how much work it really is, from the moving of the boxes to the stack. You're working on the research prices, and someone needs to make that video about the work behind what the gloriousness of an old bookstore is all about.
Right, exactly. Well, I mean, we've come to the realization only in the last maybe year that because we used to do a lot of, we'd go in and buy an entire library because we knew we could make enough money out of stuff. We'd go in, we'd figure out where the money was, make the offer, and then move the whole thing. And then in the last year, we've just realized, like, it costs a lot of money just to move books and to dispose of them, even if you don't want them. So we've had to adjust our thinking a lot.
But at the
around
same
that.
time, we still do that. I mean,
I know.
the Los Angeles book trade. Well, I've been, I think until recently, I had like a 16 year streak as being like the youngest member of the trade, the local trade. It's just like, I've been doing this for 30 years.
Right.
Somebody's got to come along and take the torch. But we routinely will, if the right books are there, we like in May of last year, we moved a collection that was 412 boxes. did it over 4 days. It was
What was it? Was it a single subject matter?
it was an antiquarian collection, but it had a
Okay.
lot of interesting association copies. It had books from C.S. Lewis's library. It had a really early and unrecorded Feynman lecture. Yeah, really great stuff. But then a lot of just junk.
Yeah.
Was that
And
was
not
Dr.
well,
Simon a professor at that time, or
This was a lecture he did at Caltech
okay?
uh, while he was still a visiting professor, so while he was still at Cornell.
yeah.
So
Oh,
this is
you know, yeah. There's a mathematician collector who would love that's a holy
we're here
grail.
in Feynman country. So.
Yeah. I
That's
mean,
a holy grail for them. That's
Yeah.
an absolute holy grail. So, one thing that I always talk about with people, I have a Patreon group called Papergold, an ongoing book hunters conversation. And I am always trying to help people who are smaller booksellers online to grow. And one of the things that I talk about all the time is that the books are everywhere. The money is everywhere. You got to go to estate sales. You got to go to the bins. You have to learn about the marketplace and know what to look for. You guys have been very blessed at the hustle of it, of getting great collections and having phone calls come your way to get collections. Are there any tips that you have for people that you might want to share? Um, because I believe what you believe, which is all try to buy in large collections because you can make the most money that way. As long as you can make your buy costs on the cherry pick books. But are there any tips you have for buying large collections?
well, I mean, I will say for sure, um, even if you're not exhibiting at book fairs, you should go to book fairs
Oh yeah,
because you should, even if you're not necessarily going to be buying things there, you should be looking at all the books in all the
right.
cases and meeting all those dealers because a lot of them, if you're doing that kind of hustling on the ground floor, a lot of your customers are going to be booksellers who are out there with the customers who are going to be able to command maybe the highest prices for things.
Right.
So at a book fair, you're going to be able to see where the trends are because you'll see a lot of similar types of things, but you'll also see what like a really good copy of something looks like, you know, because
Find bindings and signed copies, and
yeah,
again, going back to what we talked about earlier, the value. The value of what a signature holds. If it's a James Baldwin signed first edition, the incredible value of that
right,
is very shocking to people.
right,
Yeah, just to add on to what Jen says, like forming relationships with others in the trade, not colleagues, customers. I mean, we've been very fortunate that we've developed a network of colleagues who have become friends, and it makes the experience all the more enjoyable.
Mhm.
And it's like that 412 box collection. We ended up like keeping about 60, but we gave the rest to our network of,
Right.
People who do flea markets and people who sell on eBay and so on and so forth. And, they're going to think of us when they find something particularly
Right.
great or when they get a referral that's outside of their strike zone. And, or maybe it's going to be something we work together on because, that's just, the relationships that we've invested in.
Well, that's a great question too. What do you guys prefer to specialize in? I know sometimes you can't control that because you get a phone call and you go get the Hugh Hefner collection. But is there I guess we're going to get into the heavy metal soon, but Brad's going to start smiling. Is there a type of book or ephemera, a time period that you guys really hunt after?
I would
Or
say that
size?
because we're in California, like we're really into modern American archives.
Okay.
We also only speak one language, so I wish
Mhm.
I spoke multiple languages. I really wish I spoke and read Spanish. Um, but I personally like love working with a lot of the stuff I get to work with. We like to build things, so like Brad will talk about the heavy metal collection and how we built it, but um, I've built a collection which is going to be at a conference in June that is about it's all about marijuana and legalization of marijuana or normalization that's leading us to legalization. So there's smoke-in flyers from the 60s. There's um, uh, canvassing material for the many various propositions that have been on the ballot. There's pamphlets about drug use. There's board games about normalizing. There's a copy of the Up in Smoke script. I mean, there's all this stuff that has bled into kind of our psyche, if you will, about how marijuana use has become more and more normal.
Mhm.
And that has paved the way really back to legalization,
Right.
which, you know, the time period of illegalization in this country or uh, laws against marijuana are actually pretty short in the grand scheme of things. And they've
Nowadays.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, but it's all because there's all this ephemera, all
Mhm.
this marketing, all this material, all this ephemera that's been built up around it. So that's kind of the story that we're telling with this collection.
Yeah.
So let's dive deep a little bit into this collection for the audience. How does one go about building a collection? Is it you're putting ads out, you're buying things on off of eBay, you go in the garage sales? How does one go about building that?
No, well,
None of that.
none of that. Relationships, honestly.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I think I was at maybe a book fair and I saw a couple little pamphlets and I'm like, oh, you know, this is really interesting. Like, you know, and then I just started picking and buying. For 7 years.
Right, right. I was gonna get to the time frame, but when
Yeah,
you say picking, when I hear
yeah.
the picking, I think I'm going to the flea market, I'm going to garage sales.
Mhm.
Are you buying from other sellers when you go to the fairs, or are you
Yes,
literally going to the flea markets too? And you
yes.
come across it?
Yeah.
Yes,
We,
flea
we we
markets,
are of the
yes,
same
other
ilk.
sellers.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
everywhere, everywhere. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And,
And the
and
more you get the word out, the more stuff people will present to you. I mean, two of the best things I think in the collection came from other booksellers. One, which is a couple of photo albums that were made by a grower in the
oh,
70s in Northern California, and they actually are botanicals. So we have
that's special though.
it's
Yeah.
amazing. It's amazing. And then there's another archive within the kind of the archive, if you will, of a guy from Oregon who was helping to lead a proposition there to get there. He was just actually trying to get the laws for charges being lowered for possession and like a certain amount being personal possession and that ballot initiative and all the paperwork around it. And it's like an archive within the archive. It's amazing.
Is the more of the uh, it's becoming commonplace in the households and legal, and so you're
Yeah.
getting all of that information and that ephemera now.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really kind of only, I'm not trying to deal with like, there's so much ephemera right now that somebody else could pick up on about how it's being advertised, you know, how the various states are dealing with legalization. And I've kind of cut off to now it's legal and now, you know, we're done.
The road to.
The road to not necessarily because like the
Right.
somebody should be collecting what's happening now. I mean, I have a niece who actually works in this industry. She's a chemical engineer. She thought she'd be working at Coors, but she's working like for a marijuana company because that's where we are today. So, yeah, there's so much interesting stuff going on with the changes in that industry, but it's too much.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But in a couple more years, all of that stuff will be highly collectible once everything is completely legal and the
Oh,
world.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
We're very
Uh,
close to federal, I think.
right, right. And I think probably the psychedelics are probably following suit
And I'm
from
not even dealing with psychedelics. I mean,
I know, I know.
it's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, just the marijuana and the name of marijuana pot. I mean, all the names has changed so often throughout the years.
Sure.
Yeah.
So how vast is the collection though? Is it not year wise, so to speak? I know it's taken you 7 years to build so far, but how substantial is it in paper?
Um, uh, how many pieces are in it? I don't know. There's about 300,
Oh,
300 kind of pieces, if you will. It can, it's in 5 boxes,
5 or 6 bucks.
5 or 6 bankers boxes. You know, I've been trying to not, I don't, I mean, there's tons and tons of don't use drugs pamphlets. So I
Mhm.
just try to get some representative examples, and I'm not trying to have everything, trying to
Right.
have representations of things.
Yeah.
And is this going to be sold, you think, to a university after it's showcased, or do you
Yeah.
think can a private collector buy this as well?
I mean, a private collector could buy it. I'm really hoping that it goes to a university, because I think that it will be very interesting to, um, you know, college students, and research could
And
be,
yeah, research, sure. And the history of the journey of
yeah,
from plant to banned substance. I mean,
yeah,
I
it's
think that's
incredible.
something that, I mean, there's a level of personal interest for us when we build these collections, but we're also looking at the archival academic landscape going, there's a gigantic hole here, somebody needs to fill it, so, that's also the genesis of the heavy metal collection was that. And then I'm working on an archive about post-war nudism or naturism, sort of, one of these things that's, you can look in special collections and you find little, dribs and drabs here and there, but there's not, a cohesive collection that would help tell that story.
Right. And you guys are definitely filling in the mortar of the holes in what society has not, collected. So it's absolutely amazing to watch that grow, I guess. I mean, from your vantage point, to have five little items on this and then make it into 200 and then 300, and you're getting you're getting the greatest of history lessons.
oh, definitely. And I
Right.
think, but when you're deciding to build collections like this, I think you have to be mindful that it's not an accumulation. Like, it's, nobody needs to have 500,000 pieces that don't make any sense,
Right.
or of the same thing. So you want to be careful. I mean, going back to the heavy metal collection, one of the first things that we did, was, we got out like a big butcher block piece of paper, and we said, if we're going to tell the story here
Yeah.
of heavy metal, where are the touchstones? What are the points?
How do we
What
represent,
yeah,
this subgenre, this,
Right.
this movement, this moment, with, something that's, printed or ephemeric.
Right. I think you're so ahead of the curve on this because, like you said earlier, um, the punk movement has always been highly collectible, and those old flyers that were on telephone poles and always be valuable. Um, but the heavy metal collection has often been ignored. And I mean, how far back does it really go? Is it about the 60s?
Yeah. I mean, that's where I traced it to, and I think that's, what we call proto metal,
Right.
is coming out of that sort of, coming out of the British invasion.
Yeah, I remember that song. There's a guitar song, no lyrics, that gets attributed to sort of being the first heavy metal song. You remember I don't remember what that was.
Yeah, there's the Steppenwolf song that's
Right.
got the, heavy metal thunder,
Heavy metal thunder, yeah.
yeah. When we, after our first collection, actually, I found and acquired a flyer from '63 from the Fugs, the Freak Folk band. And it actually is probably the first use of the term heavy metal in a musical context. That precedes the Rolling Stone piece by 4 years and Steppenwolf by 5 years. But I mean, this term was sort of floating in the ether.
Right.
William Burroughs used it in a novel. It just hadn't really been attached. And and I'm kind of dorking out here, but like, you know,
You're allowed to. You're allowed to.
the heavy metal genre really didn't start to embrace it until like the late 70s, early 80s. It was called like heavy rock and
Right.
power music and all these other things. And yeah, it was fun to sort of get into the origins of that term along the way.
Yeah.
And this is a heavy
yeah.
metal catalog, by the way.
Okay.
So
Is
it's
this
printed
the
on
catalog of the
newsprint.
collection?
It is.
And
Okay.
if you go to our website, there's a PDF of it.
I will
Yeah.
be putting that in for us as well.
So
Yeah, it was fun. It was, because we collected, obviously flyers and the things you would expect, but we also tried to collect a little bit of the material culture. So we had like demo tapes and original photographs, and even a couple heavy metal battle jackets, with the patched up spikes and that sort of thing. So
which was not easy to purchase.
and it was
Yeah,
so much.
so
Go ahead.
did the purchasing of those items differ from the marijuana collection purchasing, or is it one and the same?
Well, some pieces in the heavy metal collection purchasing, like he just mentioned, the battle jacket. We went to a concert with a wad of cash, and we were looking at people's jackets, and we
Oh,
were
I love
offering
it.
them money. Because not only did we need to buy their jacket, we needed to buy the story, because a battle jacket is like a scrapbook for somebody who's into music. Their stories being told. Tell them the story about Levi's.
Oh yeah. So that actually the battle jacket that's in the collection, which we acquired indirectly through a Motorhead concert.
We have flyers.
Yeah. We did a presentation on the collection at a California archivist conference shortly after the collection was acquired by UCLA, and after the talk, a woman came up to us and goes, "I'm Tracy Panic from Levi Strauss, and like that's a Levi's jacket in your collection." And it just didn't even occur to us, and so that started a relationship working with Levi Strauss, and so we've since acquired other jackets for their collection. Levi's jackets that have been manipulated for punk and
the sub collection of the collection.
Yeah, and it was really great. I mean, we acquired a couple.
And we talked to their designer.
That's right. We got to go to the Levi Strauss headquarters, and they put on the Madonna mics, and we did a presentation for all of their designers in San Francisco and beyond, thanks to the internet.
Would any part of you guys looking for items for the collection then and now, is any of it eBay hunting or Craigslist hunting or any of the platforms?
A little bit. I mean, the difference between punk and metal, I mean, there's been a lot more punk material. The DIY ethos is a bit stronger there, and I don't know. As one old metal friend used to say, though, he was old Brit, came up about the time that Iron Maiden and was crossing paths with the Sex Pistols, and he was like, the only real difference was on Monday morning, the metal guys got up and went to work. And so, the metal guys tend to like hold that stuff to their dying days. It's going to go on the Viking funeral pyre. The punk stuff tends to float out on the market quite a bit more.
Yeah.
I think it was a lot of relationship building, and along the way we made the acquaintance of a number of musicians that supplied us with material, and
But you were a fan before.
Oh yeah.
And so this probably just deepened and enriched your love and passion.
Yeah, it was great. It was it's ongoing, so
well, I mean, we kind of put together this seed collection to make sure that there was an American university that had at least a metal collection. But since then, there's been various stuff that's come into our possession, and we've been able to sell it to other private collectors, but also universities that aren't necessarily like this big giant metal collection.
Yeah.
Like There was a
Yeah,
speed metal,
yeah, there was a Power Violence flyer
Violence.
collection that went to not sure.
Cornell.
No, I think that went to Bancroft.
Oh, okay.
And then there was a black metal flyer collection that went to Cornell. And
You're going to get a call one of these days. I mean, one of these famous musicians,
I
is
love
going to pass, and you're getting that call, and
it.
you're going to be back to square one. It's going to
Yeah.
be
Well, I
amazing.
mean, interesting things happen. We know because we live in Los Angeles, larger area. I mean, because we've been to quite a few well-known people's homes,
Mhm.
to buy things, and that's been fortunate. Like we learned a lot from working on the Hugh Hefner collection for a collection we got, was that last year?
Yes, yeah.
We bought Eric Idle's library, and we learned a lot from working with the Hefner collection about how to deal with a famous person's collection. And so that's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I got a couple more questions. We'll wind
Yeah.
it down. You guys started right, probably the intersection of eBay and Amazon, probably just starting, I'm guessing, with the early
Yeah.
90s.
I remember I mean, so there was from the used book side, there was Interlock, and the owner of Interlock, Dick Weatherford, was a very good friend of Roger, my mentors. So we were involved in Interlock and the proto version of Interlock.
Right.
I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but so we were sort of listing books online in the very early 90s, like and so and there was a natural progression. I remember we were in on the ground floor with Amazon. We used to get telephone orders from Amazon representatives back in the day.
You are the second bookseller in subsequent weeks to tell me this.
Yeah. And a totally different world. And similar thing with eBay, like yeah, and very early, remember it being just genuinely a California company at that point. And they were
I mean,
around.
yeah. Amazon was literally taking want list orders, and then they would call you guys and say, "Can you get this, or do you have this?" And you were book pickers for them. I
Yeah,
mean, more or less.
sure. And I mean, it was, I feel fortunate having got into the trade at the time I did, because I sort of saw the tail end of the A.B. Bookman's era. So we did a lot of postcard quotes and those lists in the magazines, and just getting copious amount of
Yeah.
mail, and then transitioning over to this, online, uh, paradigm shift.
I was there with you, except I was doing it on this coast, and I remember AB's Bookman's Weekly, and fulfilling the cards, and all of that. But I remember distinctly when eBay and Amazon was starting to gain a little traction. A lot of the older booksellers,
Oh yeah.
yeah, they didn't want to make the transition. They didn't want to pivot, and they would even say, "Oh, no one's going to buy books online."
Sure. I remember a like a San Francisco book fair in the late 90s where eBay was like genuinely trying to court the booksellers, and yeah, there was a lot of this going on.
I mean, yeah, I can, when you say that, I can feel it, because I remember those conversations back then, with some of the older booksellers and book dealers. I mean, now look what has happened. I mean, now it's Amazon, it's eBay, it's Macari, it's Bonanza, it's whatnot. I mean, it's from my vantage point, it's such a rich time to be a bookseller, because there's so many competitive platforms vying for you to put your books on their platform. Um, what do you see the future of book selling and online book selling happening in the next, we'll say, decade? Because you've been around long enough to understand, you've seen the switches and the growth in the decade. So what do you see in the next decade?
Hmm.
That's a good question.
Well, I'm going to just say, first of all, that I think that some of it's just going to still be the same.
Okay.
Like it's still, the base of it is still about relationships. So, in terms of acquiring material and, working with collectors, if you're gonna work with institutions, that is all about like making connections and working relationships. So I don't see that part changing. That part is still embedded in the old school. And
Mhm.
so you can't, you can't be like the old school people who wouldn't adopt technology and abandon those relationship building and those kinds of sales. You still need to be able to do that as a base. But I don't know, there's so many new ways to sell.
That's my point.
It's becoming
Yeah.
I don't know, a lot of the selling like seems to be becoming performative, if you will.
Yes.
You know, and it's which, you know, has its pluses and minuses. I don't want to see myself on camera any more than I have to.
You knew my
I'm
Brad,
sure the rest of the
Brad
world
knew my
agrees.
next question. Brad knew my next question was, could you see yourself ever in front of a camera and showcasing books in an auction? Not a Christie's Sotheby's type auction, but an auction just from your store.
See, the auction thing is a
know.
really I don't know. That's something that there is definitely sort of a generational shift going on with the auction issue. Like, you know, we're very
still pricers.
We're very traditional booksellers. You know, we price our books fairly and we stand by it. The auction thing, I don't know. I guess we're fortunate that we don't need to dance for our supper at this point.
I do see that trend happening though, especially with the next generation of younger book buyers who all they know is their cell phone and transactions on their cell phone. So I do see a shift happening.
Sure.
I just don't know how deep it's ever really going to go.
I think we're going to see a lot more, you know, video technology and other things like incorporate even for traditional sort of sales. I mean, the technology just continues to improve, and one of the, you know, pictures sell books, and the more and better visual documentation you can provide the potential buyer, the easier it is to you know, make a sale. So I think whether we like it or not, that's you know, that's coming.
And that's also why book fairs are so important, because those are the live performance, if you will, of sales.
Yes.
You know, you don't get to have to see it virtually. You get to see it in person. And you can talk to the seller who probably knows more about it than they should.
Yeah.
And you can see the signature in person if it's a signed book. You can probably hold the book in your hand and get that feeling that we all get from those books.
And this is why I think we're seeing attendance actually growing. We're seeing trends where attendance is growing, particularly among younger people at book fairs. I mean, we're trying in our book fairs to make them more than just book fairs. They're events. So we have talks and other things going on around our book fairs. We try to have them in locations where people want to go, you know.
Well, when you're ready to come to South Florida, I'll be the middleman for you. You got me working for you, so we'll be.
You guys have a great book fair. You have the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair.
Yeah, that's north of, I'm South Florida. That's north of me, several hours. So I mean, I'm inviting you now. You could come to South Florida.
You might have to change a little bit of the politics. We are from California, you know.
I'll make sure there's a red carpet treatment for you. We'll get everything nice and easy. Well, I want to thank you both for being on this episode of Destination Unknown. This brings me to my last formidable question that you know it's coming. In 1984, I went to a missing persons concert down here in South Florida, and of course, one of their hit songs was Destination Unknown, which is where this show gets its name from. And so I hope they never sue me for using their intro. Their intro. Where will you be sending me next? That I have no idea where I'm going.
We're going to be sending you to our very good friends in Tucson, Arizona, Jim and Lynn Owens of Thorn Books.
Beautiful.
They're great people, and every year I, with a colleague, Jesse Rassa from Trio A Books, I drive from LA to the New York Fair. And so this year we made a stop and stayed with Jim and Lynn. They're great people and fantastic booksellers, and I think you're going to enjoy them.
That's exciting for me. I haven't been to Arizona yet, so that's going to be exciting. And again, thank you for giving me an hour of your time. The audience is going to love it. I have a feeling you're going to get a lot of questions coming on that YouTube channel. So make sure you pop back in and answer some of the questions, and we'll see what happens. And I'll definitely be in touch with you guys. Thank you again. Thank you again for all your time.
Thank you. Come out to California.
I'm booking flights already. That you guys,
Okay.
you guys are my third California already. I'm ready to go.
It's a dry heat.
Yeah. Well, I was just invited to a book conference in Las Vegas, so there may be a 2-week trip coming up for me soon.
Fantastic.
Very close. Great.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.